Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Higher Density Living. We'd like to thank our podcast sponsor today, Tartle. tartle.co is the website where you can go to find a free tool that allows you to control and turn your data into a money-making asset for yourself. So if you want to share information, take back and control what's rightfully yours, and get some income on the side that you otherwise didn't have in the first place, I encourage you to go to tartle.co and sign up for free forever. Thank you. So, Jason.
And they can donate. We have two places to donate now. Tell them how they can donate on Tartle, and then I'll tell them about Amazon.
Yeah, super cool. So, for donations on Tartle, we have a lot of very good partners that come to Tartle that want to list themselves under the Big Seven. The Big Seven are 7 fundamental targets of focus that align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So as you are earning income from sharing your data, you can choose to share those data earnings directly with not-for-profits that are directly benefiting the world and the greater society at large. And you can do that very simply by putting those settings in place on your data packet and say, I want to donate to said nonprofit this percentage of my data earnings itself. And Jason,
we hope that you click on Higher Density Living for that. That's
Higher Density Living would be great.
Real quick, Amazon Smile. Everybody's heard of that. If you haven't, go to Amazon Smile, click on that. Everything I purchase on Amazon, it sets up automatically. You put it on Higher Density Living, and you'll see it. You click on it. You can search, just type in Higher Dents, and it'll pop up Higher Density Living, and then put that. So every normal purchase you do, we get a percentage of that. And that can help out the show and help out the mission and the things that we're trying to do in bringing the truth to you guys. Yeah.
No dogma, just bringing the truth. So with that being said, give it a look. We'd love your support, more learning. And the whole point here is to evolve. So getting into the unknown life of Jesus Christ, I think before you even dive into the book, you have to have a pretty solid understanding of the background of the person who writes it. We all know there are millions of books out there that have been published over time. And people write about everything under the sun. So if you're going to read something, you got to make sure it has a little bit of clout. The person who's actually writing it is a verified, legitimate, well-respected and well-vetted author to actually speak to a subject itself, rather than just coming up with some sort of thing that sells well, right? As a New York Times bestseller. That's not really what's important. You want things that are a little bit controversial, things that are hot and heavy, and things that are not financially, but suited, well-respected to the facts that are in place that can be cross-corroborated and verified by other individuals around the world. Now we're talking about an author that has a very good story. So if you can find those people, really dive into their books. Don't go with, whatever the popular sentiment is around how a person writes or thinks or anything of the sort. You got to do the research for yourself. So look into the person that's writing it before you start to absorb what their story is itself. Now, the book, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, we want to talk about the author here. His name is Nicholas Notovitch. So, Jason, could you give us a little background on Mr. Notovitch himself before we even talk about the context of the book?
Yes, Nicholas Notovitch was a Crimean Jewish adventurer. He was born on August 13, 1958. He was a Russian aristocrat. I always thought that's funny. Like, who gives you that title as aristocrat? You were born into a certain family? Did you have a certain amount? Do they have like a cutoff for wealth?
Yeah, it's probably it's a combination of probably like family wealth and education. As those three independent variables.
There's rumors that he was a spy, which is awesome. That would probably be the reason why he was traveling so much. But his main job and what he was very passionate about was journalism.
Right. Let's think about the context of the time. So he was born 1858 and he died slightly after 1916. He's hot and heavy in the Industrial Revolution. Okay. People are printing books and stories like mad, like more than ever before. Manufacturing has, a huge increase. And then with this growth in technology, there's going to be a stern reflection on religion itself, religion in the aspect of, culture and community and nations, as technology starts to drive how we think, act, talk, walk, and drive those economies itself. So we need to take a reflective look on the thing that really has been supporting culture itself. And what's interesting about Nicholas, I found, is that because he's a Crimean Jewish, adventurer, he's talking about studying something that is inherently Christian, right? In whatever, his interest might have been. But there are social circles with these aristocrats that are very well educated at the time that want to understand this, that we're typically going around, and it's like it was commonplace to challenge the status quo at the time. There was so much going on with technology that was changing life. Well, let's see if we can go back and have a relook and challenge specific things that we thought we knew were fact and actually get down to brass tacks on it. You track with me on this?
Yes, and I think it's important, when we look at his life, is that we understand that he wasn't just a journalist that wrote this one-hit wonder, and then, was considered a hoax or a fraud, and then and you never hear of again. He actually wrote political books on the role of Russia in war. So, and these were widely known. So I think this is really important. His book in 1894, this book that we're going to talk about, These Unknown Years of Jesus, where he said he left Galilee, he went to India, he studied with Buddhists and Hindus, and then returned to Judea. And they were documents because he broke his leg, and we'll get into this whole story on the Hemis Monastery where he stayed, and he saw these documents. And we'll even get into the people that disclaim that, and how that's false, because I have a theory on that, which I think will hold up.
Yeah.
And then, but I think that's important is when we look at, and I want people to understand, Jesus is probably the most, I would say, talked about figure in the world, probably most popular, more than Kanye or Kim Kardashian.
Like in all of, I'd say in regards to all of human history, there's probably a couple big individuals. Probably Jesus in terms of cultural impact, probably Alexander the Great, and probably Caesar of Rome. I'd say that those...
Yeah, the Buddha, yeah.
And in the Buddha. I'd probably say the combination of those things are probably culturally the most talked about figures with the greatest influence in human history so far.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And whether you want to put him at the top, he would at least be in the top 3, I would think.
Oh, I'd probably say he's number 1.
Yeah, just because of the amount of writings and books, and I still think they don't put it on there. But I've heard, and this may be wrong, but I've heard the Bible is still the number 1 all-time seller book, and it's still like all-time sell book because there's just so many people buying them, and they print
so many people buying it. Well, Jason, we're still talking about it right now, right here. Point in case, you know what I mean?
So I think it's important not only to understand him, but to kind of get into, just real quick, we'll do a brief of Issa, because this is where people kind of get, whether you're Yeshua or Joshua or Jesus in and of itself. There's so many names that Jesus has been. So can you kind of just briefly explain Saint Issa?
Yeah. So Issa is, in a Middle Eastern sense, okay, the words ISA are a way of describing, how would I say this, like son of man, right? So whether you look to the Quran or you look to the Bible or you look to a certain, Tibetan text, the word Issa is more not necessarily the name for Jesus, but descriptive of the man himself. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
It's almost like he's being named characteristically rather than saying just like, here's what here's who or what this man is, right? Rather than saying, I'm, Jim, blah, blah, blah. No. It's not really about the last name. It's descriptive of how the person's life is. It's enveloping of how they were known as a whole outside of just the name itself. And Issa, which has other etymological names like ESA, Essa, Issa, Isha, like any of things, there are certain, changes in the dialect or the way it was actually scribed down, because you have specific interchanges that were happening, many different cultures in specific areas. And as people are sharing stories, especially within their significant cultures, there are changes to that name itself, but respectively, it's characteristically of all of the same person, if that's making sense. You tracking with me?
Yeah,
on that?
that makes 100% sense. I just want people to know, because, we're so Western culturized, and understanding the word Jesus,
Yeah.
and so our Christ, so, and the churches have taught that so long that when we see something like, I don't want people to automatically Issa, this isn't Jesus.
No, it's descriptive of the person, right? And it's just how language is shared between Greek, Hebrew, and Latin text, right? Those things kind of mixing in Arabic text, those mixing together gives you a formation characteristically, which actually makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, 100%.
If you go to if it's like you have a million people in a field, they're all named John. Well, who are you talking to? Well, characteristically, no, it's like John with brown hair, brown eyes, who did this, and he gives me this sort of vibe.
Well, it's like even like John the Baptist in the Bible. They call him John the Baptist because he was a baptizer. He would ask people to repent and then baptize them and give them a fresh new life. So he was kind of known as baptizing.
Yeah, this is correct. Like, Tim the Raider, or like anything like that. It's like the context of how the person acts within society itself. Yeah, the berserker.
I love that. There's a theory the other day they were talking about how they were, we'll have to do a show on this with the Norse stuff, but they were actually taking psychedelics and then going crazy and then raiding and pillaging and all that. That these guys were all hyped up, just like Hitler's, they invented meth for the German
hit squads. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to understand the context of this, and we'll get into some more detail in next episodes, but Mr. Nicholas breaks his leg in India. He's recovering. You have to think of it. So I want people to understand this. This is 1800s. You break a leg.
Fucked.
Yeah.
I don't know any other word to put it, but like there's no major like medical stuff going on in the 1800s in the Hindu Kush. You're pretty much left for dead at that point.
Yeah. So whenever you have a major injury like that, I mean, this is life threatening. So this isn't like he breaks his leg, he puts himself in a cast, and he's good to go and he's just hobbling around. This is months and months and months of recovery. And he's in a monastery. And maybe you could kind of touch base on this monastery, the Hemis Monastery. And it's, I'm going to try to pronounce it, Ladakh.
Yeah, you're Ladakh. You're doing great.
Oh yeah, look at that. Me and these names are, but it was the Hemis Monastery.
Yeah, like Hemis Monastery. Yeah. No, so I want to explain something here. There are 3 very large monasteries, one of which is where the Dalai Lamas have resided for many, many centuries, in the area in Tibet itself. And from, even Kashmir up to Tibet, right? The whole area of the Hindu Kush are 3 major places where a lot of Tibetan Buddhist scriptures have been written. And so luckily for him, when he went to go make a visit to the final monastery, he had broken his leg. And so this monastery itself wasn't the Ladakh monastery, but the Hemis one. And it didn't contain all of the scripts that are recorded because the Buddhists did a very, very good job, and we'll get into why they do a good job, very good job of recording things. But because there was essentially an interchange between, monastery monks, right, and lamas traveling amongst the 3 major areas, much of the knowledge is shared also. So he learned some interesting stories, specifically about the area and its history in his very long recovery itself at the monastery. And I don't want to talk more about that before we get into the book. So just in context, this gentleman is essentially on an adventure, right? He's a journalist. He wants to understand life, right? He has a lot of very aristocratic, highly intellectual talks with groups in France and Russia itself. Doing a lot of that questioning, like I talked about, Industrial Revolution, people wanting to learn more, people really wanting to strike a name for themselves.
Studying war, writing books.
Studying war, right? You wrote a lot of political books. Why would someone who's got such a stern view on politics and war, right, even get into the fact to talk about someone like Jesus Christ? Like, how do you make that bridge? There has to be something so dramatic that occurs.
Yes, that's what I want to get into. Yes.
Right? It's highly unlikely that someone who's specialized in something would take such a steep turn, but he took his his background in journalism and applied it now to this new level of research, which came to, his book being called, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, right? Or Saint Issa during the unknown years.
Yeah. And I think this is important. And this leads us right into, because he's there for months and months and months.
Long time.
So you have to understand monastery culture, especially there. I looked this up. This was really interesting. So outsiders, there's kind of a, and mystical teachings, esoteric teachings are this way too. You're not just going to go into a secret society, a monastery, whatever. And I mean, you're not just going to roll into the Vatican today and then they're going to show you everything and release everything and tell you all about all their, this takes months and months of trust before. And this is really, really important because when we get into the people accusing of this being a hoax, this is really, really important. It takes time to get to know these people. It takes time to the head lama to understand who he is, understand the culture. You're being respectful. They're in turn, more than likely, he's allowing them to use their healing methods on him. Which is really, really important because, majority of Westerners, Russians, whoever it may be, Greek Orthodox, however that may be, would say no and think it's like demons or demon possession. You're not putting that ointment on me. There would be, I could just imagine somebody from, Great Britain coming there, breaking their leg, and then they're having sage and prayers for them and putting special spices on them and stuff like that. They would be so anti all of that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's not, think about it, there's no physical evidence, right? There's nothing like scientifically supporting it in our, our Western views of how science actually works. So why would you even like put this stuff on me? Get this paste off of me. I don't want any of these incense burning. I don't want to do any of this stuff, right? It's diametrically
and I think it would
opposed.
be a stark contrast, I think, for people to understand this, because this is very, very important, because when we get into the hoax, we're going to immediately dismiss it because of this. In the Native American culture and, the clash that we had here in the United States, it would be the same as a general or a colonel in the cavalry living for months and months with the Native American tribe. He breaking his leg, they taking him in, and then they using Native American ways to heal that leg and to help him.
Yeah. Oh, and not to mention every other invader that has come into that area of the Hindu Kush has tried to burn books, get rid of the religion in place, and institute another one. Like every outsider, you'd naturally be cautious if they'd be like, they are a threat. You don't know who they are. You don't know what their true intentions are.
Culture, and he talks about this in the book, their culture is so diametrically opposed. I mean, they had polyamory.
Totally different.
So their culture totally different. And everything is guarded, like you said, because of the raids and pillaging and everything else. Everything is guarded. They're not going to willfully choose to share manuscripts with you, ancient manuscripts that they value more than anything in their life. They would have gave their life for those.
Right, because it's the basis of their culture, of their religion.
Which
and
gets
in a
us
time,
yes. Go ahead.
In a time when nobody can read and write. Not even the invading rulers knew how to read and write. You know what I mean? It's like you are going to protect. This is gold. These are like library. This is like the Library of Alexandria in the Hindu Kush, if that makes any sense. 100%. And how many people wanted to burn that thing to the ground?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, any invader, any enemy would say this is their strength, this is their knowledge. If we want to take them over, we've got to wipe out everything about them.
Precisely.
So if you're an English scholar, somebody with the church, and you send a letter to the head lama and ask him if this person had been there, or if they got if those manuscripts. So you go right into an aristocrat in England at the time, sends a letter over to him. Letter comes back to, no, we never heard of him. We never. Of course, you're not going to say, yeah, we've got these manuscripts about Jesus. We sure want the church to come over and burn everything to the ground.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, who's the guy? And you say this doesn't happen. I say bullshit. In the 1920s, the guy that with argon gas, what did they do to him? And his
what happened to him?
And his library.
See ya. Burnt it.
They
destroyed
burned everything to the ground. The United States government burnt all that stuff to the ground because the technology and the science was too much for them.
Oh, orgonite?
Religion.
Yeah, orgon? Oh, really interesting. Yeah. No, we're going to have to get rid of that. Yeah,
and it caused this UFO craft to come. We're out on this. And we're gonna. So you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna burn his whole place down. Burn all his.
We're gonna destroy his credibility,
we're gonna
his
put him in
background,
prison, and make sure he dies. That's what we did,
and totally defame him. Everything he's built over his entire life, just make him out to be an absolute fraud. Here's the best part. This is what I love, and this is so juicy. So many people came out to attack this guy publicly in his reputation.
Yeah. Yes.
Out of the woodwork. This is what happens when you say something, right, that is so upsetting to the status quo of what is going on, to the hierarchy of power that people have. Every fucking theologian is rolling in their grave when a dude writes a story about this.
So let me bring it up to this time frame, because people need to understand how ruthless religions are. There's a documentary on Netflix right now for the 1980s and 1990s on the Mormon Church covering up manuscripts.
This is awesome.
This is in the 80s and the 1980s, 1990s. This is in our lifetime. It's in your lifetime. It's in my lifetime. They caused a car bomb, a house bomb. They blew up the manuscripts because it was showing the Mormon Church to be kind of a little, we don't know, it's a little sus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little suspect.
So if the Mormon Church can do this in the 80s and 90s, what do you think the empire that is known to be ruthless? You got to think of the time frame here. The English Empire is known to be ruthless. Everybody knows what they do.
Well, and think about it. How much the Queen of England, kings of France, people that are apparently ordained by God to be in the position they're at, and someone says, wait a minute, there's a gap in the story? Dude, think about how they would literally bring all the resources together to make that person disappear.
Yeah, and there was one guy that was the main dude named J. Archibald Douglas, and he went there and he interviewed the head lama.
Yeah.
So he goes there. You could see this British, all that bullshit. I am the professor of English and history at the government college. So he visits the Hemis Monastery, and he's going to come in there with. I mean, you could just picture all of this. He's going to come in there with troop, maybe like a bodyguards, a couple people with his
15
entourage,
translators.
Yeah, all of that stuff, and then want to set him down and interview him.
Yeah,
of course. People are going to deny everything. They're going to feel like they're in the Inquisition.
Yeah, like absolutely not. Why? And first of all,
they weren't nice to him.
No, why would they tell him anything? They're like, I gotta go meditate. Get the hell out of here. But
and of course, that's a bias. We'd be like, perfect. Talk to him. Spent 10 minutes with him. We manhandled him a little bit. We got out of that fucking shithole.
I pushed a llama around. Oh my god! But consider this.
I need to hear.
Why is everybody so fired up about the fact that somebody found some bit of evidence about knowledge that they otherwise didn't have? You don't know. There's a gap. You even say there's a gap, but somebody comes to evidence and you bash him for his evidence?
Yeah.
It's a missing. He's not bashing the Bible. He's not bashing what Mark, Luke, John, and everybody else had written post facto. He's only talking about the gap in someone's life. In a journalistic sense, where does someone go who's so important for 16 years? Where's that fucking person disappear to? He's not questioning the church, nothing of the sort. He's only trying to find out why someone disappeared. And why would that bring down so much heat on him? Because he found out where somebody went.
Oh, journalists, how much heat did they get? What's that one journalist in Saudi Arabia here? Got mutilated, with the prince or whatever, and they covered all that up.
It hasn't changed.
So we got into the hoax. Let's get real quick into the corroboration and those claims of these people that have major titles, people that actually, aren't these, trying to have an agenda. Why don't you get into a little bit of those people real quick, just so that we can set this book up, so that people understand the factuality of it.
Okay. So in terms of corroboration with what Notovitch's claims are, there were people that were born after Notovitch, okay, journalists and explorers themselves, that actually found out about the story of Notovitch secondhand, corroborating the fact that that gentleman was actually there having conversations with specific lamas and other people of the Tibetan religion, right? One of those individuals was Parahamsa Yogananda. Parahamsa Yogananda wrote specifically that Nicholas Roerich, who was an explorer 20 years after the fact that Notovitch was actually over there in that region, stated in detail all of the specific things that Notovitch had done. He had actually shared that with Roerich. And then Roerich had also gone to see if there was substantial evidence supporting these things that occurred. And in fact, through the story, found out that, oh, wow, that's really interesting. It does look like this gentleman, Issa, spent 6 years here in a Buddhist sect in Nepal and Tibet before returning to Palestine. Oh, and there's actually written historical record? This is really, really interesting in that there are people like Bharati Krishnatirtha and Paramanasa Yogananda, two specific people from different regions of Buddhist sects, both corroborating the fact that this other third-party gentleman, not only Notovitch was there, but also the story of this gentleman, Jesus Christ, who was walking around studying in that specific region of the world. Really, really interesting. Why would those people want to make it up? There were also French explorers that happened there at that specific time that were very well, vetted in the communities, right? So, if you gift certain stuff to people that don't have much, right, they're going to weigh those things high. It's like, why do I see a Coke machine or like an American brand on a t-shirt, being worn by people in developing countries? They were gifts. They were given there. There are certain things that actually corroborate, evidence in and of itself with the objects that people have after they've been in those areas. Whether the fact that someone was given an alarm clock. What the hell are you going to do with an alarm clock? I'm a Buddhist. I wake up at the ass crack of dawn and I go to bed when the sun starts to set, post my meditation. What do I need an alarm clock for? But these gifts still reside, these physical objects, things that actually show that these people were here. And there's tons of written and physical evidence to support that through very distinct cultures too that sit outside of it. It's like third and fourth party corroboration. It's tremendous.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
I'm done with that rant.
When you look into these people's lives, one of the men that stood up for him, had been nominated 3 or 4 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. So these are scholarly people. These are people that, had a reputation, and they went and stood for him, just because it makes sense. I mean, it totally makes sense when we get into, and I think the next episode, when we start getting into the book, you're going to realize and see how amazing this story truly is.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into. So just to give you a little background, Nicholas Notovitch was a journalist, specifically wrote about war, with Russia and politics specifically. He was well-spoken in Greek, Russian, and French. He brought with himself translators over to India, broke his leg over there, and then found himself in a body of evidence what he otherwise didn't know existed that caused a massive, massive mar to his reputation from people that were heavily in bed with the church at the time, trying to say that what he was saying was an absolute farce. So, come back for the next episode, and we'd love to tell you more as we break down the unknown life of Jesus Christ.